Well, hey, Doug, thanks for joining me
Dave.
today. This is, of course, my first time getting started with this podcast type format interview. And, you know, I think right at first just calling this Meet the Team. I'm kind of introducing, I want to introduce people that I work with at Rockwell or have worked with in general. So I've got some kind of broad ideas of what I want this to become. So yeah, it's a little loose here at the very beginning.
Been like a journey. Fine.
But even though I'm the host, even though I'm the host today, I'm going to do something a little different to kind of start off the first episode. So I've asked Doug to interview me and go through some questions. But before we do that, since Doug, you're here, why don't we have you introduce yourself? You're most famously known for your bow ties, and some people know you for your mixology, right? So tell us a little bit about Doug Forbes.
Yeah, so Doug Forbes. I work at Rockwell Automation with Dave Wagner. Been here for 4 years. Actually, this week is my 4-year anniversary week, however that works out. I've been fortunate to be at Rockwell as a solution consultant focusing on information software the whole time. But this podcast is more about us and not Rockwell and our roles. So yeah, so when I anytime I go to a trade show, whether I attend it as an attendee, just get to go to booths, or if I'm working a booth or presenting, I like to, dress nice, but I also wear a bow tie. It just kind of stands out, and dorkily, it's just kind of like, oh, he wears a bow tie, he must be smart, like the Bill Nye kind of mentality. But also, if somebody needs to find me, if you're a sea of, roughly average height people with dark hair, it's hard to find. And so I'll tell whomever I'm meeting, I say, hey, I'm going to be wearing this shirt with the bow tie. And they don't have to look for hair or anything. Just they look for the people with bow ties. So, as far as the mixology, so it's always fun to chat with people about if I try some new bourbon or different gin or just mixed drink. It's always it's a nice way to kind of share some ideas, or try a cocktail that was interesting. And, Dave's one of my friends that I do that with, and I have a few others. So, it's been good. I've worked with Dave, I think, going on 3 years now. So,
Yeah, we were on the same team right after you got hired on. So hard to believe it's 4 years ago already. Yeah. That's just crazy. Time flies. Yeah, I remember. So your bow tie comes back to mind when we were on that team, and of course the pandemic started right after we kicked that team off, right? And we started those happy hour calls. I think it was like the first one. You showed up with a martini and a bow tie, and I was like, man, this guy looks like a waiter.
So my manager, and he was like, look, guys, we just need to have some fun. So every Wednesday at 4:00, so it was still kind of office time. It's kind of like getting away with something. So we're going to have happy hour. Just, if you want to have a beer, you can. And everybody else was wearing T-shirts or sitting outside. And, I had a dress shirt and a bow tie, and I was drinking a martini.
Yeah, those were some good calls. I think that was kind of nice at the beginning when we were all stuck at home.
Yeah.
So, and a couple of people were out riding their. Well, I shouldn't say couple. I think we had one guy who was riding his 4-wheeler and trying to live stream that to our happy hour call. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah,
those are good. Yeah, it was a good team. Of course, that worked out to be how we got to know each other pretty well. Mm-hmm. So, I guess if you want to go ahead and start asking me questions, Doug, since I asked you to interview me, go ahead.
So. This being your podcast, we're going to kind of knock out a lot of the questions early instead of getting right into where you are today. It's going to be like, how did you get where you are? And so we're going to start back in the 80s. So what was it like growing up in the 80s? Who was Dave in the
80s? Yeah. So Parachute Pants and Van Halen, right? Those were the 80s. Yeah, so when I think about growing up, so this all ties into like my career, right? But I came from a family full of a little bit of experimenters, and I was fortunate enough to know some of my great grandparents.
Wow.
My great grandfather was a blacksmith at GE, and he had a blacksmithing shop at his in his farmhouse where he retired in his garage. So he was a make your own tool kind of guy, whatever you needed. And my other great grandfather was quite I guess I called him like the mad scientist. He would take us in his basement, and he had like the Jacob's ladder with the big spark that would go up, and he had a couple of unique little trinket inventions that he did. And he was an engineer, and he had a small garage, single car garage, and a small car. But there was like a hill, and this was in Erie, Pennsylvania. So ice and snow in the winter, and his driveway went like down into the garage.
Okay.
So he actually got and built into the concrete floor of the garage a turntable. And he would get out of his car, and he'd just pull like the pull chain, like an old pull chain light, and it would start a motor that would actually rotate his car 180 degrees. So when he was ready to pull out of the garage, he could just go up out onto the street, So, my dad was kind of the same way, real hands-on. We were always, tinkering with something around the house, fixing things. And so I think, when I think about my formative years, about growing up in the 80s, a lot of my, hands-on, getting involved with electrical things, motors, all those things, it really lent to what, my whole male influence was at home,
From that point on, you did some sort of sales or technical role.
Yeah. So, my grandfather was a salesman for IBM, a career salesman. My dad was a salesman for a number of different companies. Before he started his business, it was fluid power. So he was doing hydraulics and pneumatics. And, then he just saw a need for electrical, some electrical control supply in that Western PA region. And he felt like he could open up something to fill a gap. And it didn't take long, and the business grew, steadily over time, and, supported the family. And it was a nice opportunity to get involved in the family business. But yeah, I went right into doing cold calling. So we would pick up an industrial directory. Dad would sit there and say, here's the accounts you need to call. And I literally would just pick up the phone and say, hey, can I talk to somebody in engineering, electrical engineering? And just kind of go through a little spiel, ask them what products they used. It was really, I guess you could call it grassroots, right? Like I learned quickly how to have conversations with people that were meaningful. Because if you weren't making your case pretty quick, or at least sounding like you knew what you were talking about, the conversation was not long.
So why are you not CEO?
But it was fun. I mean,
Good.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun because, you did establish relationships over time. I learned how to interact with people in a way that I think that it's a little lost today. We kind of don't do any of that stuff anymore. And it's always kind of frowned on when you think about telemarketing, right? Like it's a tough business, but, it was fun. I look back on it with good memories.
So why are you not CEO of Wagner LLC?
Yeah, well, so, the family business was, it was going along pretty good. I definitely think it was a growth experience in many ways. I had a chance to get involved in some levels of management. Whether I was doing drive, sales, technical sales for drive support, whatever it was that I was doing, it was pretty good. But, yeah, so really the long story short is for me, and what I tell most people, is that the family, there was some strain in the family with the business. And so, it got to time where it was time to make a change, just really for the sake of the family, which looking back was the right decision. So yeah, it was good. And it gave me an opportunity to get outside of the family business. I mean, I spent 18 plus years there. So it was the only work experience I had. So I went from there to ABB and had some experience working outside of the family business, which was really nice to see how I could take my experience to a new employer and really utilize that. So,
did you?
And then it wasn't long after that Rockwell found me.
That was going to be my next question. So I guess a good question for any of the younger generation out there. Do you like what you do? Are you happy with your career choice, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm a people person. I think that for me, over the years, as I reflect on like what do I like to do and what do I like about my job, I always come back to the same things. I've been in some sort of sales or technical sales role in everything that I've done, and I mean, I love in meeting new people. I think everybody has a story, and I always kind of have this vision that when I get to know somebody better, I'm going to get to hear at least a part of their story, maybe a lot of it. And over the years, I'm sure a lot of the guys I knew in business have retired, but the stories I've learned and heard from them, um, whether it's at their place of work or in their personal life, I mean, those are, to me, those are the gems of life, right? Everybody's got these cool, unique stories they tell you. Um, I also have enjoyed my second most thing is I love the fact that throughout my career I've gotten to be involved with how things are made, right? So there's those shows on TV, how it's made, and they're kind of interesting. I mean, it's fun to see some stuff, but it's different when you are standing in a plant. You have the smells of the plant, you have the sounds of the plant, and someone's giving you a tour. I mean, I've had a chance to be in all kinds of different steel mills and glass plants and all kinds of manufacturing, chemical plants, and even down in a coal mine, right? So it, this work has taken me so many different places and experiences that, most people I know don't ever get to see. So I love what I do. Yeah, I love it. It's been great. I wouldn't have, if looking back, I don't think there's a different career that I would have
Yeah.
picked, really.
I'm like a kid. Whenever I get to go to a factory, like I got to go to a food manufacturer to make cereal, and I was like a 10-year-old kid. I was just giddy, like, oh my gosh, like I eat that, and this is how it's done. I mean, I understand how most of the machines work and all that stuff, but just getting the tour or seeing how tires are made, and I'm the same way. Seeing the big machines and the smells and the sounds, and yeah, I really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I too like being a drives guy, if I classify myself in that realm, right? The other drive guys that watch this or listen to this will appreciate this. We all have our stories too. Like most of us have been out in the field somewhere trying to get some application to work correctly for a customer, being working through some challenges, and there's always just some fun stories about that moment when the light bulb went off, and you're like, that's the problem. I need to make that parameter adjustment. The thing, takes off and runs like you want it to. Customers smiling. I mean, those are like your, dopamine moments, right? Where you're just super elated because you just come off as a hero with the customer. And then of course that experience is always there when that happens the next time something similar comes up, right? You're just like, oh, I remember how to fix this problem, So yeah, there's a lot of those moments. So, I mean, if I could remember them all, I could probably could have wrote a book if I just kept track of everything.
So Rockwell, you're a drive expert. Do you just focus on technology, or is there a specific industry you focus on as well?
So yeah, I mean, so they call it power at Rockwell, right? So it's a larger portfolio of power products, which includes motor control centers, drives, medium voltage drives, and soft starts and MCCs. So it's a kind of a wide portfolio, and so this role I have now, my title is solution consultant, which sort of envisions that there's multiple things that come together to build a solution. So that could be some services, some hardware. It could be packaged in some way, to make a solution. So it's not quite on our systems business side. So I'm not looking at the, whole, caster line or something like that. But I usually get involved in something that involves multiple products. And starting in October, I ended up moving into a more industry focused or vertical, which has kind of been fun. I've been spread out over so many industries over the years that it's nice and broad. but having a more industry focus is kind of fun because I've really just kind of dug into the steel industry, the metals industry in general. Primarily steel is where I've started, but it's lately, in the last few years, it's certainly been an industry that's got tremendous growth in North America. So there's just a lot of investment
I find being
in metals and steel
I find out being
mills.
industry focused as well. It helps with some basic street cred. When you go somewhere and you introduce yourself, and you're like, I focus on drives, and I'm the metals, or I'm the metals person. So that way you don't, and there's nothing bad about being broad either, because then you get to see what the different industries do. But I always felt like the customer had that warm and fuzzy when I said, "Oh, I came from a pharmaceutical company, or I have a background in this." So
Yeah, it's also learning all the lingo too, right? Like I've had to almost start my new book of acronyms. In metals they talk about electric arc furnace, but they always abbreviate that as EAF or BOF. There's pickle lines, and that's not where they make pickles. So that's that's actually treating the steel, right? So learning some of those things and just understanding the lingo and not that I haven't been around some of that. It's just that I haven't really needed to know the specifics, but now I've spent a little more time digging in and trying to understand, hey, what is it that we do in the steel industry? And of course I have a sustainability piece that I really have kind of been interested in and focused on. So understanding about the steel industry and how we move towards decarbonization is also a pretty hot topic. There's, it seems like new papers being written all the time. So I'm always kind of digging into those papers, trying to understand, okay, what is the metals industry doing in their progress in that decarbonization, into their goals, right? Because people are putting these goals on the map for 2030 and 2050.
So keeping in mind that this podcast is about you and Dave is not only a Rockwell employee. You're being mid-career from a career standpoint, but you're also, midlife, and so am I, not making fun. Who is Dave outside of work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, most famously, it seems like I'm the ice bath guy now, but so I have I've been married for 29 years, and so my wife and I have been together for quite a while. Our kids, my two boys, they're 21 and 24, so 3 years apart. Yeah, my 24-year-old lives out west. He's in construction. Still have the younger one at home. But yeah, so usually when I'm not doing work stuff, I'm, involved with just stuff around the home. I'm not much of a sports guy. I'm not a golfer. But, I do like being outside and putzing around my yard and cleaning things up and working on stuff. Enjoy going to Canada. We have a place in Canada that I like to go to for the real R&R time. So I'm looking forward to the ice melting up there. I'm itching to get up there.
Grid, isn't it?
Yeah, it's off grid. It's solar, and you still have cell phone service there, which didn't used to be the case.
Utility, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. It's an outhouse. Yeah.
So the bottles behind you, are those just reminiscences of life's past, or are you still enjoying?
Yeah, well, for a fact, Doug, that those bottles are there because you told me about those brands. So the Hendrix. Well, the one in the middle, I think, might be one that I found on my own. But I think a couple of those still have some gin in it. I've been I haven't had much gin lately, so yeah, I go back and forth. It's Scotch or bourbon usually, or the favorites.
So you mentioned
right?
the ice bath. Do you want to go into that just a little bit?
Yeah, so this is kind of funny. I was reading a book. It talked a little bit about this. It just mentioned cold showers sort of in passing as something that people do, and it can actually give you sort of a good dopamine rush and feel good. And I thought, man, cold showers, that sounds like total punishment. And then if you saw my video on LinkedIn, I kind of was thinking about sustainability in this whole cold shower venture, and like, well, maybe I could use a little less fossil fuel, because I have in our bedroom we have a natural gas hot water heater. It's an on-demand hot water heater. But I was also having like a lot of pain in my hip. I've been going to the chiropractor and trying to figure out what was going on. And I thought, well, maybe the cold exposure will help some of this inflammation I was struggling with. So I started like turning the dial down a little bit each shower, because it's really hard to go full, cold turkey, literally cold, So I did. And, in December, I did a few stretches, and then we went on vacation out west to see my family out there. And so I kind of departed from the cold shower for a little while. But when we got back in early January, I said, well, I'm going to start this again. And I'm going to post something on LinkedIn as partly see if it gets see if anybody bites on this cold shower thing, just as a conversation piece. And partly to commit myself to it, right? Like if you publicly commit to something, there's just this thing in the back of your head that's like, okay, now you have to keep going. So yeah, right. So I did, and I think it's probably going to be in the next week or so. I'll hit my full 3-month mark, and I can say that honestly, I haven't taken one warm shower. Even I was just sick last week with COVID. And the day before, like the fever hit, I thought, man, I better get like a cold shower now, because I'm sure I'm going to get a fever, and I'm not going to want to take a cold shower when I'm chilled, So I did, and I've had a couple warm baths. I will admit that. So, but as far as showers go, I've done all cold showers, and then after I got pretty comfortable with the cold shower thing, and I did feel like, when you get out of the cold shower, you do feel kind of this rush of like, hey, I did it again, and if you know me, I still have enough layers on my body that I think I can handle a decent amount of cold. So I thought, well, now I got to try the ice bath thing, because that's the next level, right? So I went out to it was Tractor Supply, and I bought, it's basically a trough, right? That I think it's for your animals, but it's a 110 gallon. Put it on the back porch, filled it up, and then of course it was still pretty cold at night, so it started freezing over, which was kind of perfect for what I was hoping for. And, it did really. That was really hard at first, and it was surprisingly. I guess what I was surprised about was how much like my feet hurt. Yeah. In the first dip, and then like the second one, like I did a minute the first time, then I did 2, and then I did 3, and the most I think I ever did in the really cold was 6. And I think when I did 6 minutes, I came out feeling pretty chilled, and I thought I might pull back a little bit. So I kind of settled in on a 4 minute. I usually try to go 4 or 5 minutes. A couple things that surprised me. I found that first of all, it did seem to help the pain. Like there was definitely an improvement in pain. So it was good for that. It's supposed to reduce inflammation like any other cold treatment, right? It didn't take that long for me to warm up. Like, even with really cold water with ice on top, I just get dried off, dressed, and go back to whatever. And, it wasn't like, there wasn't any bad experience there. But yeah, I was surprised that on the days where the water, because I didn't really have a lot of ice to throw in there to cool it, so I kind of went with whatever the temperature of the water was. When we started having warmer days and the water was a little bit warmer, it was actually harder to stay in the water when it was a little bit warmer versus like the really, really cold water. I found myself actually getting I would shiver in slightly warmer water, and I wouldn't shiver in the really cold water. So I guess that's typical from some of the things I've read. Some people say it's harder, but yeah, since I was sick last week, I just haven't been back in the ice bath. But yeah, it's a cool experience. I would say, I guess there's always potential risks for people depending on your health situation, but I think that Yeah, I think there's the whole mental battle. That's what that Andy Huberman, that he's got the podcast. He talks about like focusing on the mental walls you're transcending. So you got this mental wall about even getting in the water, right? And you get through that when you get in. And then there's a moment where you're like, man, I should get out. This is cold, and you like kind of talk yourself through that wall. So you kind of build up sort of this stamina. And I find myself when I'm outside and it's cold, I don't get all freaked out about being cold anymore. I'm like, oh, I can push through this because I know what cold is like and I know I can survive it. And so it is kind of interesting how it does change some of your thinking. And that's fun too. Like it's a little bit of a growth experience. And then it's fun. Out of everything, it's been fun conversation. I have people now that'll just like out of the blue. I had somebody just, a week and a half ago just come up to me and be like, Dave, I got to ask you. And I'm thinking, what is this guy going to say? And he's like, tell me about these ice baths. What's the deal, man? So like your bow tie, good conversation piece,
my
right?
adventure with ice as well. So I have a local gym here and they've got like a sauna and a cold bath. So I do make sure I have to work out like 2 or 3 times before I get to just go and do a sauna. But when I do the sauna, I'm in there it took me a while to build up, but I'm up in there for 20 minutes now. And then if I leave the sauna and try to go home, it takes me 10 minutes of sitting on the bench just to cool off because, you're in the sun. So then I was like, I did the cold plunge, but it was like 15 seconds. I'm like, but even then it was just hips because there was just a ladder down. And so over time, every time I'm like, okay, last time it was hips, so now I have to so I always progressed like you did. And then once I was fully up to my neck, it would be, okay, 30 seconds. And yeah, my feet really hurt that first time. And then 45, 60. I think I can get up to like 1.5 or 2 minutes. That's pretty much it for me. But yeah, the more you do it, and if you start going more frequently, it's a mental battle because there's a clock there too. And so I can stare. I can do 5 more seconds. And then when I do that, I'm like, I can do another 5 seconds. I'm not doing minutes like you. I mean, for me, 5 more seconds is a win. So, but yeah, I actually agree. Like when I get out, I feel really good and rejuvenated. And so.
It is interesting because I guess they've done studies that show that you get like, it's kind of like an adrenaline rush and a dopamine rush together. It's kind of a dual thing. I mean, I guess there's no potential real downside to that, but it does give you a good feeling and it can last for some time. But yeah, a couple of things, like it was kind of funny because my wife always hates when I would take hot showers, I would always steam up the bathroom and then I would get like, some heat for that. So now I tease her. I'm like, I don't even have to turn the fan on now. I just taking a cold shower, there's no steam at all. So, but yeah, it's, for me, the cold shower thing, you just get busy. Start washing your hair. You don't linger. You just get what you need done.
Yeah, you get in and out. So.
Yeah. But it's not as bad. And another thing too, like, I have well water, so there's a certain temperature. I know the temperature I'm getting is probably not like super, super cold. Because if I go to stay in a hotel in the winter, oh my word, it's like way colder, and it's been harder to keep up because it's going to hurt. You're like, geez, this is really going to be stinking cold. But at home, I found out that as hard as it sounds at first is to just put your head under the water when you turn it on and start right on your head. Like you wouldn't think because it's just maddening when you don't do it that way, then you have to like inch your way in and it's actually harder. So if you just turn it on.
Yeah. Walking down steps into the cold water is awful. I get on the first step. It's a ladder. I get on the first step and then I just drop the 3 feet because I'm like, just stepping down to an inch, it's just maddening.
Yeah, that's it's funny you say that because like when we go to Canada and the lake water's been cold, I always hate that process. And in the summer, I try to just dive in because it's all over in one shot. But getting in that ice bath on my back deck, like hasn't been that hard to just step in the tub and just sit down. It's the weirdest thing. Like it's not the same frustration of going down a ladder. I don't know what it is about that process,
because you're
but that
down.
that yeah, getting past different levels is painful. I don't know, but I haven't done too much in the bath. I had ice bath. I've only dunked my head like one time, and maybe I did it twice, but I don't know. I didn't find that it was that much more. Some people are like, that really is the thing. And I was kind of like, I don't know. It didn't seem to make that much difference for me. So I've kind of just tried to go up to the neck as much as I can.
So Dave, you shared with us, how you grew up, how you did family business, how you ended up at Rockwell, and what's on your future?
Yeah, I don't know, right? I guess I look for each day, look for whatever opportunities there are. I know some of the things I've added to my role at Rockwell are get involved with some of the employee resource group stuff, like our parents caretakers thing. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see. This new role that I'm in now, that's industry focused, is kind of fun. I'm really enjoying getting involved with that. Again, like I said, the sustainability thing. So I'm hoping that one of the things I'm hoping to do is some podcasts like this with interviewing some people that are related to that metals industry, and I'm hoping that maybe I can kick something like that off. So yeah, this is kind of an experiment. First of all, to help people get to know me. Secondly, to learn how to do the podcasting thing and get better at it, so we can interview some people. Right.
Well, thanks for sharing the story. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks, Doug, for taking the floor on this and interviewing me. I appreciate it. This has been fun. Next time I'll have to interview you a little more. Dig into who is Doug Forbes more. So, well, for the audience today, hey, I want to thank everybody for joining, who's watched this and listening. Hopefully you found it beneficial to get to know me a little bit better. And again, my hope in the future is to do some of these with some other folks that I work with to really expose their true personalities, to my audience here on the podcast, on LinkedIn in general. So I think that's the beauty of social media I see, is that it gives us an opportunity to hopefully expose who we are. And, that way, if you need something and hey, I know that guy from LinkedIn, a little bit about the background of that person, you feel a little bit more connected. And certainly, as I said in the podcast, I do love meeting new people. So hopefully this is also a door to opening up some new relationships too. So, well, thanks, Doug. I guess we'll wrap it up there. Yeah, appreciate it.